When you say hybrid cloud, a lot of times that word gets a little confused. Are you talking about hybrid because they have multiple solutions that they're implementing, or are you actually seeing federated applications where an application will actually span between more than one of those solutions?
I expect it to evolve into hybrid in everything you just said. We're starting out where it's both a public and a private cloud, but also moving to where a fully federated system, because there are some environments where you might host the application itself in a public cloud, easy to get to, anybody can get to it, but keeping the data because of security issues in a public cloud, keeping the data in a private cloud.
Yeah.
So that's where we're seeing some of the initial combinations as people go to a hybrid. If they're not purely pub or private, then the hybrid is whatever can be seen unsecurely or with less security on a public, and then full security on a private.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because even when you talk about that example that you just gave, you're saying I have, say, my payments I'm going to keep in-house because I need that from a security standpoint, but I'm not moving workloads. The traditional application was, we're coming up on Thanksgiving and I need to, be able to burst and be able to do a lot more. We find those a lot more rarely. Obviously you get companies like Netflix that have huge bandwidth, obviously Amazon and the like, but most companies, they have certain pieces of the data or the application that are living one places, because moving data between those is difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a part of the challenge is where does the data reside? How do you keep it? What's the life cycle of it? And the burst is probably the biggest reason that a lot of people are going to public cloud, because they can get it immediately.
Yeah.
But now it's helping, again, helping the IT departments understand their usage patterns. So in the past, most IT departments have kept kind of a capacity trend, but they haven't really looked at the demand. When did they get hit hard? When did they need that burst? And that's a part of the shift that we're bringing in and helping them understand if they're going to build a private cloud, they have to be positioned for that burst. That's also where public cloud and even public cloud providers can be of great benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about, in the public cloud, you really pay for the average, as opposed to the private cloud, you have to pay for the peak. So, you really want to be able to shrink that difference, which is, having some kind of hybrid strategy can help us. I'm wondering if you have an example. There's so many different paths that customers can choose. Do you have one that you can say, how did they, address their portfolio and choose, what went where?
Okay, so we're actually working with a client right now that started it's a software company. They're 25 years old. About 5 years ago, their customers started asking for them to host the services. What they realize is that IT is not their strength. Their strength is the software application. So they're moving to a software as a service model where they're going to start with a private cloud that will ultimately, what our expectations, so we have to work with them over time in a business where the application will be in a public access where everybody can get to it, but the data, because of its sensitivity relative to personally identifiable information, the records that it's keeping will stay in a private cloud. And so we're very methodically helping them move IT to a managed service that goes into a private cloud that ultimately I think will evolve.
Okay, so I've heard a lot of times when you're talking about kind of the public versus private, it sounds like security and the kind of the government risk and compliance, the GRC, are kind of some of the main reasons why people would keep things in-house. Is that true?
Right, and that's exactly it. Because of the data security to compliance, one of the key areas is auditability. And to be able to ensure that you can pass an audit, the public cloud providers are moving in that direction, but they're not guaranteeing that they can meet all of the government compliance, everywhere from a healthcare to other security areas of PII, personally identifiable information.
Yeah.
So they're not guaranteeing that at this time. So that's why a lot of that data is staying in private.
So there are a lot of service providers that are putting together either hosting or services that they offer for specific verticals. Are you seeing that taking off anywhere, or is it kind of much easier to kind of have things in house today?
I'm seeing, I say, healthcare because of the data taking off. I'm seeing different, some manufacturing, but most of the area that I see it right now, and it might be one of the areas that we're focused on is Datalink, is in the healthcare area.
Okay. So if customers are still having stuff in-house, Kent, I want to get back to you. What are customers, how does it change their purchasing decision if I think that, some of it's going to live in-house, some of it's going to not be in-house, it's sometimes moving back and forth. What kind of impact does that have on what they're purchasing in-house today?
Yeah, I mean they're trying to go to a delivery as a service model, and one of the challenges with cloud is really hard to generalize, and we probably couldn't in this session figure out all the different ways. You mentioned Salesforce as an example of cloud that is extremely popular. Amazon is being brought in to a lot of organizations so they can do something quick. Ultimately, it's about the application. What are we trying to do, right? It gets down to that. If I wanted 500 servers for 4 hours, then that's a good use of public cloud, right? If I prototype something quickly because I don't want to buy the infrastructure for something that I'm not sure if it's going to go into production yet, even as a software as a service company, as an example of, they may try that out on public cloud because I can get it more quickly. So agility is one of the things they get from cloud. As they roll into production, then they may have to, think about, well, how do I run my environment more efficiently? Anybody who's providing those services, Mark gave an example of a software as a service provider, wants his back end to be extremely efficient. Whether I'm serving out applications to internal customers or I'm serving out applications to external customers. So a lot of times they'll find that I may go and prototype something out on public cloud because it's quick, and then I want to start bringing that back in-house and to run it in production because that's more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. Dev test is huge application for the public clouds. I'm wondering from a technical standpoint, getting from that public cloud back inside a lot of times can be a challenge. It's not necessarily running the same stack. If you said I'm running VMware in house, we actually did a survey and said customers love that dev test in the cloud, and in house they want their own production environments, and they said in theory it should be the same stack. But if you look at what everybody has, who's the market leader in-house today? It's VMware, and who's the leader in the cloud? It's Amazon, and that's not the same virtual machine today. So how do you help customers bridge that gap?
So that's a great example. So as providers of technology, everybody's cloud is what I have. So there's an example of a market leader in the private cloud saying, this is my definition of cloud, and a market leader in public cloud saying, this is my definition of cloud. And as you pointed out, how do I manage that? It's not compatible. How do I deal with these different departments going out and putting something maybe in a public cloud that I have no control over because there's no management? That's probably changing, as Mark pointed out. We see people going to hybrid. So, Microsoft's got a strategy that has a hybrid strategy between Azure and their private cloud. VMware has now announced a strategy that there is a lot of compatibility, so that they can go and prototype something in what they call VCHS, which is intended to compete with Amazon, right? They could go and prototype something out there, but with the same management and security and networking policy, bring it back in. So I call this a two-lane highway to the cloud as opposed to a one-way.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about, well, how do I get things back and forth between incompatible clouds? So that is a challenge. How do I manage this?
Yeah, no, great point, because if you looked at both of those examples, you're saying if I choose all Microsoft, I have a great strategy. If I choose all VMware, I have a good strategy. However, as you've seen from what you guys are offering, lots of different vendors today, and customers, tend not to just buy off a single vendor. I mean, there's plenty of companies that might standardize on IBM. They've got a good cloud offering with the soft cloud now. HP has their offering. Oracle, has the full red stack even in the cloud now. So we can do that. Mark, I guess from a services and kind of a management standpoint, can you, weigh in on this topic?
Yeah, and that's actually one of the areas that we look at is when to move to cloud, how to move to cloud. Some of the big decision areas really deal with CapEx versus OpEx. Do the companies want to own the assets? Do they want to, as you said, if you're going to own it, you have to build for spike. You have to build for the biggest use case and demand that you have. Whereas if you go to cloud, all you're doing is you're paying for average. So your per unit cost is more, but your total cost of ownership is probably less by managing that. So, and that's what we work with some of the clients on is looking at, do they want to stay with the CapEx model because that fits their business better and they don't give up the controls, and where does that fit into their operational expenses? So we look at it from an operational and cost point of view.